So where do those game-changing ideas really come from? The ones that just totally disrupt an industry or create a brand new art form. Well, I'll tell you, it's not magic. It's a specific way of thinking, a mental process for just exploring endless possibilities. And today, we're going to break down that exact process, divergent thinking.
All right, here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with what I call the idea explosion, that raw generation of possibilities. Then we'll get into how you can actually measure this mental muscle. After that, we're going to bust a super common myth about creative potential versus actual performance, uncover the critical second step that so many people miss, and finally, see how it all comes together in a really powerful creative partnership. So let's kick things off right at the very beginning, that moment of generation where it feels like we're creating a whole universe of options out of thin air. Okay, to really get a feel for this, let's try a classic exercise. Just for a second, think about it. How many different uses can you come up with for a simple brick? I mean, maybe a doorstop, a paperweight, a weapon, a bookend, a garden border, a makeshift hammer. That whole mental process of just branching out into dozens and dozens of possibilities, that right there is divergent thinking in action. This really frames the two fundamental ways our brains work. On one side, you have divergent thinking. This is all about creating choices, that big, sprawling, messy process of generating as many ideas as you possibly can. And its partner, convergent thinking, is about making choices, narrowing all those options down to find the single best answer. You need both, for sure, but they do completely different jobs. So you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds pretty free-flowing and abstract. How on earth could you possibly measure something like that? Well, it turns out you can. Researchers have broken it down into 4 distinct, measurable parts. Let's take a look. So how is this actually scored? Well, it's not just about quantity. First, you've got fluency. That's the raw number of ideas. Then, originality. How unique are they? Are they ideas nobody else thought of? Flexibility measures how many different categories you hit. For the brick, did you just think about construction, or did you also think about art, or using it as a tool? And finally, elaboration. How much detail can you add to flesh out each idea? Okay, so let's say you take one of these tests and get a super high score. That means you're the next creative genius, right? Well, not exactly. And this leads to one of the biggest misconceptions we need to unpack.
See, these tests are excellent at measuring creative potential, but potential isn't the same thing as performance. Think about it like this. Having the perfect physical build for a marathon runner doesn't automatically get you a gold medal. You've still got to do the work. These tests show you got the raw material, but turning that potential into real-world creative achievement, that takes something more.
And here's another really important point. Divergent thinking is not just another word for intelligence. They're related, sure, but research shows they are totally distinct abilities. You can be incredibly intelligent, but not all that great at divergent thinking, and, vice versa. It's really its own unique cognitive skill.
So if divergent thinking is this powerful engine that's just churning out possibilities, what's missing? If it's not the final stop on the road to creativity, then where do we go from here?
And this brings us to the real turning point. We've generated this flood of ideas. Some of them are brilliant. Some are, well, they're a little bizarre. Now we have to figure out what to do with them. And this is that all-important second step. Because, let's be honest, an unchecked idea engine can produce a lot of noise. Originality just for the sake of being original isn't the goal. I mean, 1,000 original ideas that are totally impractical or irrelevant, they're not going to solve your problem. Originality needs a partner. And this, right here, is where it all comes together. See, true creativity isn't about one type of thinking winning out over the other. It's about a dynamic partnership, a dance between two processes that absolutely need each other to succeed. So here it is, the core of the creative process. It happens in 2 phases. First, you diverge. You go wide. You explore. You generate ideas without any judgment. That's the idea explosion. Then, and only then, do you switch gears and converge. You apply that critical, analytical thinking to evaluate, filter, and refine those ideas into something that actually works. But here's a catch, a really fascinating one. This evaluation phase has its own trap. The big insight here is that we have a bias against our own most original ideas. Research shows that we often struggle to see the value in our most novel concepts. underestimating them just because they feel unfamiliar or maybe a little risky. Getting past that bias is a huge hurdle.
This brings us to what a truly creative outcome looks like. It's not enough for something to just be original. It also has to be effective and appropriate for the situation. It has to actually solve the problem. Real creativity happens where novelty meets usefulness. So in the end, don't think of creativity as a single magical spark of genius. Think of it more like a disciplined dance. It's a structured process that moves between the wild, untamed exploration of divergent thinking and the sharp, focused wisdom of convergent judgment. Mastering that rhythm, that's how great ideas are truly born.